A new Texas law requires posting the Ten Commandments in public school classrooms. The looming legal battle and more today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. Where do Texans stand on how well state legislators are doing their jobs? What about how well the president's doing his job? Some clues in the results of a new poll by the Texas Politics Project. We'll talk with the director. The Mexican flag, long flown at restaurants, at cultural events, more recently making a prominent appearance in protests. We'll talk about perspectives on symbolism and cultural expression. Also, we'll get an update on what's being done to save failing public schools. All those stories and a whole lot more when the Texas Standard gets underway. Right after this. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 26th day of June 2025. I'm David Brown. A raft of new decisions from the Supreme Court today, including one relating to Texas. A high court siding with a death row inmate who claimed he should be allowed to use post-conviction DNA evidence to challenge his sentence. We're still waiting on a few more cases with a Texas nexus before the court ends this term. But there's another issue the Supreme Court may well take up in the not-too-distant future. Now that a coalition of civil liberties groups has promised to challenge a new Texas law that would require the display of the Ten Commandments in public school classrooms. These same challengers recently notched a win against a similar law from Louisiana in a federal appeals court last week. Andrew Schneider of Houston Public Media is tracking this story. Andrew, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So what do supporters of this law say about why it's needed?
Well, they advance two arguments. One is the historical argument. They argue that the Ten Commandments counts as a historical document because it's been used to underlie pretty much every major piece of foundational legislation in the country, starting with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. They argue that up until 1980, when a Supreme Court case ruled that schools could not do so, it was a common sight to have the Ten Commandments in the classroom. They argue that a recent Supreme Court case effectively reversed that precedent, and so it makes sense as a teaching tool to have them in the classroom. The other argument that they make, and this is something that really more came out in the floor debates, was the moral argument, which is a lot of the supporters argue that everything that is wrong in schools and societies today stems from that original Supreme Court decision when the Ten Commandments were taken out of the classroom.
What about the folks who are opposed? Who are the groups involved in this planned lawsuit, and what are their arguments?
The groups involved are a coalition of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and the Americans United for Separation for Church and State. And the argument that they make is that this is a clear-cut demonstration of a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. They make the point that there are two sections of the First Amendment that deal with religion. One is the Free Expression Clause, which guarantees people the right to practice the religion of their choice, but that is only enforceable up until it overrides other people's right to free expression. And that's where the Establishment Clause comes in, which says that the government cannot legislate or choose or enforce one religion over another. And that's what they say effectively that this is doing. And the argument that they make behind this, among others, is that this legislation out of Texas and the same law out of Louisiana legislate a very specific wording of the Ten Commandments based on the King James Bible. So this is an explicitly Protestant version of the Ten Commandments. And when I was monitoring the Texas legislation, there were several attempts made to say we should be able to showcase alongside this version the Catholic translation and the Jewish translation. And those are both shot down.
It's very interesting because I know the case that you're referring to, Kennedy versus Bremerton. This was a very famous case involving a high school football coach's on-field prayer after games, and the court found in 2022 that this was protected by the First Amendment. I was going back and rereading that case, and it's interesting what it says. It says, the Establishment Clause does not compel the government to purge from the public sphere anything that an objective observer could reasonably infer endorses or partakes of the religious. And so they explicitly reject what used to be called the Lemon Test, a three-pronged test, which many people may have heard of in the past. But it basically says that the Establishment Clause has to be interpreted by reference to historical practices and understandings. That would explain why we were hearing so much about the historical aspect, it seems to me, in the legislative debate, no?
No, that is exactly the point, and that's what they're saying was the reference to the 1980 case, which was Stone v. Graham, which involved the display of the Ten Commandments in, I believe, public school classrooms in Kentucky. They argue that because the Lemon Test no longer applies, that Stone v. Graham is no longer effective case law, and that the Ten Commandments can, in fact, be displayed in public school classrooms.
What's the end game here? Is this going to go all the way to the Supreme Court? How do you read it?
It's certainly possible. After last week's decision, where a three-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that Louisiana's law was unconstitutional, the Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill said, "We're going to appeal. We don't accept this decision." So the next step is probably going to be an appeal to the full bench of the Fifth Circuit. But if Louisiana doesn't prevail, they have shown every indication of appealing that to the Supreme Court. And the fact that there's now a Texas case that's likely to come about means that the Supreme Court is even more likely to get involved.
Andrew Schneider covers state politics at our partner station HBM, Houston Public Media. Watch this space, folks. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Earlier this month, the Texas Legislature wrapped up its 89th session. So what did Texans make of how well lawmakers are doing their job? According to new polling data, only around a quarter of Texans approve. That finding comes from the Texas Politics Project, a nonpartisan organization long tracking the opinions of folks here in the Lone Star State. Joining us now to unpack some of the key findings in this latest survey, Jim Henson. He's a professor of government at the University of Texas and director of the Texas Politics Project. Jim, welcome back to the Standard.
Great to be with you, David.
Let's begin at a high level. You asked whether people felt like the legislature made the lives of Texans better or worse. Tell us what the folks said.
Well, the reviews, as you alluded to, were not glowing. Only 3% said very clearly that they made their lives a lot better. Another 19% or so said that they made it somewhat better, but the plurality, 37% said that the legislature made their lives somewhat worse or a lot worse. Now, there's some partisan structure in there, as you might expect, but overall, not rave reviews.
Interesting. As your data points out, a slim majority of Texans opposed the THC ban that Governor Abbott vetoed this past weekend. With the GOP in control of state government, Jim, how does this issue seem to break down among Texas Republicans?
Well, that's where the interesting part is in terms of this conflict that we've seen over the issue between Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Patrick. 46% of Republicans support the ban, 39% oppose it, 15% don't know. So I think the balance here is very much up for grabs, and that's why I think we saw Governor Abbott think pretty long and hard about how to handle the bill once it made it to his desk.
For those who missed the follow-up here, I think Governor Abbott's going to call a special session in which he's going to ask lawmakers to take a closer look at regulation. So this is not off the table altogether, and it's sure to be a continuing conversation. Watch this space, as they say. Your polling also looked at some of the bipartisan issues from this legislative session. I think a lot of people would say bipartisan. On what issues did there seem to be some relative political consensus between the two parties?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were maybe a little bit surprised by this, but it's interesting. There's a set of about a half dozen issues in which 2/3 or more of Texans support what things that the legislature did, and very meat and potatoes things. The reliability, 84% supported the reliability of the state's improving the reliability of the state's water supply. 78% the creation of a dementia prevention and research institute in the state. 74% supported increasing for the public education system. Similar levels of support for things like lowering property taxes, restricting access to social media by children, and clarifying when doctors in Texas can perform a legal abortion if a woman's life at risk. On that last point, very controversial, got a lot of attention. 68% supported those clarifications, which the legislature did pass and the governor did sign.
Interesting, you asked how Texans feel about President Donald Trump's performance. What did Texans tell you?
Well, 44% approve, 51% disapprove. So he's been 7 points underwater. And that was, a decent amount of movement from our last poll in April when he was about even, slightly positive at 47, 46. What we saw was a little bit of erosion in every group, probably most notably. He's still over 80% job approval among Republicans, so it's not like he's in trouble, but the honeymoon period after a tumultuous first few months, I think, is definitely over.
We just have a few seconds, but if you can step back, are you seeing anything noteworthy?
Yeah, I think the thing, particularly thinking about things we've talked about before, David, is that as people remain concerned about the economy, it's not pushing immigration and border security off the table, but to the degree that the border is quiet and the economy is still a source of a lot of doubt and anxiety, the economy has really changed the issue terrain for a lot of Texans, in particular Texas Republicans.
Jim Henson is a government professor at the University of Texas and director of the Texas Politics Project. We're going to have a link to more detail from this survey at texasstandard.org. Jim, thanks again.
Great being with you, Dave.
Digital producer Wells Dunbar with a talk of Texas this hour. Wells, welcome back.
Howdy, David. Good to be with you. Interesting development regarding the Supreme Court this morning. Chief Justice John Roberts announcing that tomorrow will be the final opinion day of the term. And that's going to make for one stacked news day. As you referred to earlier, David, several cases with Texas connections, including Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton. That revolves around the Texas law requiring age verification for pornography websites. Mahmoud v. Taylor concerning parents' religious views in public school instruction on gender and sexuality. And Trump v. Casa. That's the administration's fight against birthright citizenship, a concept that has not been seriously challenged until now. As Miles Helfand says on Blue Sky, Friday is the final decision day for this term. We'll know what's up by this time tomorrow. And we certainly will, and we'll be bringing it to you live, I believe. That's just one story that we're watching, David. I'll be back with more at the end of the show.
Let us hear from you. In the meantime, look for Texas Standard on your social media platform of choice. Coming up, a one-time company town back in the mid-19th century making a big move to preserve its history. There's a whole lot more of the Standard just ahead. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Galveston Historical Foundation, celebrating Juneteenth. As Juneteenth's birthplace, visitors can explore exhibits, tours, and events honoring the legacy of freedom all month long. More at galvestonhistory.org/Juneteenth 2025. Support for Texas Standard comes from UNT's online master's degree in Advanced Data Analytics program, preparing business professionals to shape the next generation of AI business solutions. More at online.unt.edu/data analytics.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Angela Kocherga. Its history is in its name. Sugar Land, Texas began as a company town for the sugar industry in the mid-19th century, and that history is complicated. Now the city has made a move to preserve its history, acquiring what's called the Imperial Historic District. Devin Rodriguez is a director of redevelopment for the city of Sugar Land. Devin, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We're happy to have you. Tell us about the Imperial Historic District and its significance to Sugar Land.
Sure. Imperial Sugar, it was one of the longest operating businesses in Texas, and it's a cornerstone to our city's identity. The company's crown is actually featured in the city's seal itself. And Imperial Sugar, the company's approach is they started here in the what is now Sugarland, starting their business and needing to attract people here to come and work at Imperial Sugar, and so that was the company town approach to building Sugarland. They created jobs, and that created this demand for housing, created the demand for other businesses and services, and just kind of that whole economic cycle of what it is to build a city. And now Imperial Sugar is how Sugarland of today got its start. And so that's one of the big reasons of why, we still have these historic buildings here that speak to that history of how we got our start as a community, and we want to preserve it.
So why did it take so long for the city to acquire the property?
So it's been privately held for 20 or so years, and I think there was multiple private owners that had the intention of redeveloping the site into something else. And so the city's approach was really supporting those efforts by the private sector to try to redevelop the site, create it into different things. The vision was different types of mixed use that integrated those historic properties. But it's a challenging site, to redevelop, and a private developer, what they face and versus what a city would face in terms of redeveloping a site like this. It's just a different business model, if you will. And when, after all these years, the site had still not been redeveloped, our city council, said redevelopment is Sugarland's future. We're not building out much anymore, and our biggest, most important redevelopment site is the Imperial Historic District. And so they made those priorities and decisions. And when we tried to continue to work to see how can we make this happen, and it was just came to the decision of the city's the one that's going to need to be put in the driver's seat if we really want this site to get redeveloped and we want to preserve our history.
Well, give us some details. How will the city of Sugarland be involved in the redevelopment effort?
Sure. Well, so first of all, we had to assemble 6 parcels in total. It includes the historic properties as well as some other surrounding land. And so we had to assemble all of those parcels. And then we do intend on doing some visioning and community engagement of what should eventually this entire site be. But the most important pieces is the Char House, which is really the most prominent, iconic building of the historic district, the one that's right off of Highway 90 and is about 8 stories tall. It is deteriorating, and we need to take some steps to preserve it if we want any chance to really be able to reuse the building in the future, or just for it to continue standing for the next 100 years. This year, the Char House and the Water Tower are 100 years old, and we will be celebrating that with our Sugarland Heritage Foundation. So we're taking some of those steps to actually preserve the building, and that's really our first step after we finish this acquisition. We are going to be replacing the roof. There's some temporary exterior wall repairs that needs to be done. We will be repairing and replacing all the windows. Basically, the building's like 98% windows. It's like over 200 windows. The windows on the north side of the building are actually the original windows. And so we will be looking to repair those windows and then hoping to do some replicas for the remaining 3 sides to bring it back to what its original exterior was those many years ago. And so some other, mechanical, electrical, plumbing upgrade type things that need to be done. But those are all really important steps for us to stabilize the building with the hoping to maybe return it to some usable condition someday. We don't know what that use might be, but we want take these steps to preserve that opportunity for the future.
Well, that gets into my next question. So what is next for this historic district? What's your vision down the road?
We're really going to be using the community to help us, just answer some of those questions. We're going to be facilitating some community engagement sessions over the next several months and help identify the priorities that will ultimately guide the long-term vision of the site. So we know some of these initial things. We needed to be put in the driver's seat. We needed to have this, acquisition of the site. We're moving forward with then the preservation to kind of have those opportunities for the future. And then we'll be engaging the community over the next several months to identify what are those community priorities that will guide the long-term development of the site. And we can't do this alone. And so we will be looking for a development partner that will help us eventually make all of this happen.
Anything else you'd want the public to know about this effort?
I think that we're just really excited that we've gotten to, this point. It reflects who we are and where we're going as a community. We're going to be doing more redevelopment. It's shaping the future that honors our legacy while embracing really what is this like thoughtful, purposeful growth, creating places that's part of our past, but it's also part of the future generations for Sugar Land. And so we're laying this groundwork for the, reinvestment of our community. And we're really starting to see some real momentum. And we're really excited about that. Building a community where people want to live, businesses want to invest, history that is preserved along with progressing into, the future. So Sugar Land's ready and we're just getting started.
Devin Rodriguez leads redevelopment efforts for the city of Sugar Land. Devin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. The city of Dallas is renaming 3 lakes along the Trinity River in honor of Native American tribes with historical roots in North Texas. As Pablo Arauz-Pena of KERA reports, the Dallas City Council voted unanimously to name them the Three Sisters Lakes.
Rachel Salinas is a member of the Lipan Apache tribe of Texas. She says her ancestors hunted, traded, and traveled throughout what is now Dallas long before it was a city.
By naming the lakes after 3 historic tribes with ties to North Texas, you are not only recognizing our heritage, but you are also bringing visibility to the Native community of Dallas and North Texas.
Each of the Three Sisters Lakes was renamed with the word for sister in the Apache, Comanche, and Wichita languages. I'm Pablo Arauz-Pena in Dallas.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT Austin's LBJ School of Public Affairs, announcing its new Master of National Security degree. Applications for 2026 open on September 1st. Information at lbj.utexas.edu/national security. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill that allows state agencies to develop their own remote work policies. As KUT's Andrew Weber reports, the governor's support comes months after he tried to require state workers to come back to the office.
Abbott quietly signed House Bill 5196 last Friday, days before his deadline to veto bills. The new state law runs counter to an executive order that more or less prompted it back in March. That's when the governor required all state employees to come back to the office. The order upended remote work plans for employees from across the state and left agencies scrambling to find office space. Maggie DeSanza with the Texas State Employees Union says the governor's signature wasn't altogether shocking. After Abbott's order, state agencies and lawmakers of all stripes came out in support of telework, arguing it was a proven tool to help Texas retain employees, according to the state's own study.
We know that state employees are just as, if not more, productive when they're working from home. So yeah, I think we just kind of saw the backlash from that.
With Abbott's signature, the law goes into effect in September. I'm Andrew Weber in Austin.
Outrage continues to grow over the death of a sailor from Brownsville. The League of United Latin American Citizens joined other groups demanding justice for 21-year-old Angelina Resendez. LULAC CEO Juan Proaño says the case was mishandled.
Instead of immediately treating Angie as a missing person in danger, the Navy reportedly marked her as AWOL and waited 6 days to issue a missing persons alert.
Resendez went missing May 29th. Her body was discovered on June 10th in a field near Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia. The city of Fort Worth has agreed to pay $250,000 to the family of an uninvolved driver killed during a 2023 police chase. KERA's Penelope Rivera reports an officer crashed into Andre Craig's car while chasing a stolen vehicle.
Witnesses said Craig had the green light when an officer crashed into his car during the pursuit. Craig's father sued the city last year, alleging negligence and wrongful death in connection with the crash. Craig's death prompted questions from the public about the Fort Worth Police Department's pursuit policy and whether the officer who crashed into Craig followed the department's pursuit guidelines. The city council unanimously approved the settlement, and city officials continue to deny any liability. I'm Penelope Rivera in Fort Worth.
The largest plume of Saharan dust this year is bound for Texas. Forecasters say it could hit later this weekend, creating hazy skies all along the Gulf Coast. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Aspire Allergy and Sinus, providing same-day results and custom treatment plans to tackle allergies at the root of the problem. Over 40 locations throughout Texas. More info at aspireallergy.com.
33 minutes past the hour, Texas Standard Time. I'm David Brown. For many in the Latino diaspora in the U.S., the flags of their heritage hold weight and meaning. You'll see them on homes, restaurants, and, as many might have noticed recently, in protests, too. As someone who grew up on the Texas-Mexico border in El Paso, Mondo Rayo, host of the Tacos of Texas podcast, knows a thing or two about all this. Mondo, great to talk with you again.
Hey, David. Glad to be back.
For folks who don't know you or your podcast or are just tuning into the Texas Standard for the first time, tell us a little bit of background about yourself and growing up where you did and how that relates to seeing the Mexican flag a lot on this side of the border.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was part of everyday life. You know, El Paso being along the border and this idea around our identity is really tied to the borderlands. We would go back and forth to do, I mean, pretty much like day-to-day things, from visiting families to going to the stores, going to schools. So I think that we're really tied into what we call dos mundos, of this idea that, you know, you're
Two
American,
worlds.
you're born. Yeah, two worlds, exactly. You are part of this idea around being in the United States and being born in the United States, but also have that Mexican heritage.
Yeah.
And it kind of like weaves back and forth. You're not just one thing. And so for me, it's this term that's always used that I love is somos de aquí y somos de allá. We are from here, United States, and we are from there, from our country of heritage.
Well, you know, seeing the flag at restaurants, and I can see how that's a direct tie-in to the stories that you typically cover. It gets to the meaning that people attach to the flag. But, you know, often those who use the flag don't have control over how that meaning is interpreted, how that's translated by those who see it. Do you have any concerns about that personally?
No, I really don't, to be honest. One image, one photo, one situation doesn't identify a whole population.
Yeah.
When we're talking about like 11.7 million Latinos in Texas, you know, so there's a lot of history, there's a lot of roots in our identities. And yeah, we start with food, you know, like this idea around like, oh, well, what is this pride that we have around the Mexican flag? It's the colors, it's the meaning, it's the, you know, even in our foods, like chiles en nogada that really kind of bring in the red, the white, and the green, or even something as simple as a pico de gallo, right?
Sure. And so, that thought has occurred to me before. It was like, wow, this is kind of a celebration in a way.
Yeah, it is a celebration. And, you know, it's also part of the struggle that we have to honor where our parents have come from. And whether you're second, third, or fourth generation, that's part of the idea around improving your life and taking a chance and going to somewhere else. But you still, at the root, you have that identity that is strong. It allows you to persevere. And I believe, for me, that's kind of the symbol of the Mexican flag.
We've heard and seen criticism over some of those waving the Mexican flag during the protests in L.A. And Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum criticizing the use of that flag after there's this memorable photo of a protester on top of a vandalized car, backdrop of flames holding that flag. She seemed to be concerned about the flag being used, in her words, as a provocation. Sure. Yeah. And I think this gets to a conversation we've had on several occasions, not you and me, but in other contexts where a flag is being used and people want to attribute or do attribute certain things to the flag that may not be intended. What's your take on that conversation?
Yeah. When you think about what the meaning of the flag and their connection to Mexicans and immigrants and even indigenous people, it's a tool to strip away the rights. And so waving any flag in the United States, it's your First Amendment right. So the idea that one image is going to put a tarnish, on a whole people, they're going to do it anyway because they're already doing it. They're separating families. They're doing the ICE raids. People are living in fear. And just, another image, I don't think it's going to change people's minds around the rhetoric that's been going on. And I think that's very iconic, I would say, to what people are really gravitating using that flag for, to show the culture, show the pride, as well as show their rights, they have to be here in the United States.
Mondo really mixes it up with in his Tacos of Texas podcast, bringing in all sorts of layers and levels of cultural.
Like a good onion.
Absolutely, sir. Mondo, it's great to catch up with you again. Oh, I should mention something. We're going to have links to your podcast over at texasstandard.org, so you got to check it out if you haven't yet. Mondo, thanks again.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from H-E-B, whose mi tienda salsas, marinated meats, tortillas, quesos, and more are inspired by the authentic flavors of Mexico. H-E-B. Here, everything's better. Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas ABLE program, helping eligible Texans with disabilities save and plan for the future to pay for qualified disability expenses with a tax-advantaged ABLE account. Learn more at texasable.org.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The balance of power in the NBA may be shifting back in the direction of the Lone Star State. The Dallas Mavericks, San Antonio Spurs, and Houston Rockets have all had big summers. Dallas and San Antonio took center stage in the basketball world last night with the first 2 picks in the NBA draft. TPR's Dan Katz has more.
With the first pick in the 2025 NBA draft, the Dallas Mavericks select Cooper Flagg from Duke University.
No surprises there. Since the Mavericks beat the long odds of just 1.8% to win the lottery pick, it's been clear that they would take the opportunity to draft the 6'9" forward. Flagg's arrival marks the Mavs a contender once again following a season derailed by injury and the team's decision to trade away its superstar Luka Doncic to the Lakers. General Manager Nico Harrison called the opportunity to select Flagg a once-in-a-lifetime chance for a team only 1 season removed from being in the NBA Finals. Flagg says he's ready to have the ball in his hands on day one.
Talking to Coach Kidd, I think he just has a lot of confidence in me to just come in and be an impact player. He's going to, let me have the ball a little bit, I think. And just try and rock out and do what I can do.
The San Antonio Spurs gave their up-and-coming team a boost in the draft, selecting Dylan Harper from Rutgers University with the 2nd overall pick. The son of the 5-time NBA champion Ron Harper was widely expected to be selected by the Spurs and already had a mural unveiled earlier this week in his honor on the south side of San Antonio. The 6'6" guard said he's excited to join Victor Wembanyama and Stephon Castle, the team's last 2 top picks, and the league's reigning Rookies of the Year.
I mean, the game is just going to open up so much for everyone because, when you got so many ball handlers and so many people you put in that position, anything is possible.
The Spurs also selected University of Arizona's Carter Bryant with the 14th pick. Bryant, a 6'8" forward, is considered to be one of the most underrated players in the draft with some of the highest upside potential. The Spurs have missed the playoffs for the last 5 seasons following their historic run of 22 straight playoff appearances and 5 championships. It was their first draft in 29 years without Greg Popovich as head coach. However, Popovich, who stepped down last month following his recovery from a stroke in November, remains the team's president of basketball basketball operations and was heavily involved in the draft strategy that landed Harper and Bryant. The Houston Rockets made their splash just days before the draft. They traded their 2025 picks along with Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks for one of the best players of all time, 17-year veteran Kevin Durant. The Rockets finished second in the Western Conference standings last season and hope Durant's experience will propel their young squad to the next level come playoff time. I'm Dan Katz in San Antonio.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Angela Kocherga. The first deep space images from a mountaintop observatory in Chile have scientists excited for what they could soon learn about distant galaxies and dark matter. The Vera C. Rubin Observatory boasts a 3,200 megapixel camera. It can capture and transmit massive amounts of data. Our tech expert Omar Garriaga wrote about the observatory and what scientists hope to learn for CNET. Omar, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us about the Rubin Observatory in Chile and what makes it so noteworthy.
Well, for one thing, it's new. This is the first major project from the observatory. It has been in the works for many, many years with funding from the Department of Energy and the National Science Foundation in the U.S. The telescope has a 21-foot wide mirror, and the development of just the mirror began in 2007. And the facility started getting built on the Cerro Pachón mountain in Chile in 2014, but this is really the first year that it's been in operation. It's been kind of a long road to get here. A lot of the excitement around the observatory is around its advanced image capabilities and how it'll be capable of capturing an entire view of space, at least from Earth's point of view, every 3 to 4 days.
Yeah, amazing. So let's talk a little more about that. All that attention paid to this high-resolution camera. Tell us about how much data it can collect.
Yeah, it's the largest digital camera ever constructed at 3,200 megapixels. That's about 3 billion pixels per image. There was a presentation this week that that some of the experts gave, and they showed images from space that were stunning, but we were only seeing like 2% of the full picture. To present the entire view of one image would have taken 400 large HD TVs, something you could fill a football field with in order just to display one of those images. So it's a lot of data, a lot of vast, big images. And every 24 hours, the observatory is going to be generating about 20 terabytes of data. That's the equivalent of if you watch Netflix nonstop for 3 years. That's how much data that is generated every single day.
Well, thank you for helping make it understandable to us Earthlings. So how do scientists hope to sift through so much information?
Well, it's going to be transferred to multiple locations where astronomers and other scientists will have immediate access to it. But it's not just going to be people going through it. There's already software that's running that is going to be scanning this information for changes in the night sky, for any kind of anomalies or patterns. And of course, going forward, AI is going to play a role in this, obviously, in kind of crunching that large amount of data.
I can imagine. So scientists hope to learn a lot more about what they know today about dark matter. What is dark matter and why is it so interesting?
Yeah, there's still a lot we don't know about dark matter, but as we understand it, it's made up of these unknown particles that provide the gravity that kind of holds galaxies together, that keeps them from flying apart. And the interesting thing about the observatory's tie to that is that it's named after the American astronomer widely credited for finding the early evidence of dark matter, Vera C. Rubin. That is who the observatory is named after. She was an American astronomer and very well known in space circles.
Well, are there other kinds of research scientists hope to glean from these new tools?
Yeah, they're going to be looking at supernovas, stars, millions of asteroids flying across the solar system. One of the interesting things that they talked about this week was, apart from being able to capture 10 million galaxies in these images, they're also tracking asteroids that they've been able to find 1 million asteroids in our solar system, and they're looking to discover 5 million more within the next few years. And one note within their presentation that was good news is that none of those big ones are heading our way. So that's good news.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear that, Omar. So the National Science Foundation and the U.S. Department of Energy fund this observatory, but there have been some well-publicized cutbacks at those agencies in recent months via the Department of Government Efficiency, better known as DOGE. Has the observatory been affected by the NSF cuts?
Not so far. In fact, their budget is going up currently, but it's less than what they were expecting. So it's expected that they're still going to be able to continue this 10-year survey to kind of track and chart the night sky. But that could change, obviously. They could get some budget cuts, but as of right now, the budget's actually going up.
So this sounds like a very ambitious project. What did it cost, and why Chile as the location?
Well, it cost close to $1 billion. I think I've seen estimates from $810 million to $1 billion, which puts it at, I guess, 1/1000th of a Tesla. But Chile was selected because of the dry night sky. They just have a very good view from there. And there actually has been this type of work being done out of Chile, funded by the U.S. since the 1960s. So we've already had a presence there for quite a while.
So track record, and obviously the dark skies are important. Omar Gallaga wishes his camera had 3,200 megapixels. He joins us here each week to talk tech and sometimes science. Omar, thank you.
I sure appreciate it. Keep watching the skies.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the Texas ABLE program, helping eligible Texans with disabilities save and plan for the future to pay for qualified disability expenses with a tax-advantaged ABLE account. Learn more at texasable.org.
It's not just about the brisket or the ribs or the sausage or even the sides. It's the culture and people who are passionate about it. Where there's smoke, there's Daniel Vaughn, Texas Monthly Barbecue Editor. Join us next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Where There's Smoke comes from HEB.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The Austin Independent School District Board votes tonight on a plan to improve 3 middle schools that have gotten consecutive failing grades from the state. The Texas Education Agency will have final say on the turnaround plans that it's requiring for Burnett, Dobie, and Webb middle schools. As KUT's Becky Fogel reports, while those plans are based on a model that's improved student outcomes at other schools, success can be hard to maintain.
In early April, Austin ISD Superintendent Matias Segura announced the district was considering closing Dobie Middle School to avoid state sanctions. The reason? Dobie was set to get its second F in a row from the Texas Education Agency.
The one thing I want to be very, very clear, and I've said to our board, I've said to our community, is there is not going to be a strategy or path that I support that introduces a risk of state intervention.
A few weeks later, it became clear Burnett and Webb middle schools were in the same boat. Austin ISD actually says all 3 schools are at risk of getting their 4th failing grade this summer. That's a high-stakes situation for the district because if any campus gets an F 5 years in a row, the state can remove the elected school board and replace them with a board of managers. Sound familiar? That's what happened in Houston ISD in 2023.
The Texas Education Commission will take over Houston Independent School District.
Speculation has been swirling for weeks now.
The decision was finalized behind closed doors at the state capitol.
To avoid a similar fate, Austin ISD had several options. It could do things like close the low-performing campuses or partner with a charter school to run them. Parents and students demanded the school stay open. So administrators decided to overhaul how the schools run, which will cost $1.7 million per campus. The turnaround plans are based on what's known as the Accelerating Campus Excellence, or ACE model. Andrew Hodge is with the TEA.
The ACE model is essentially a pretty resource-heavy model to turn around campuses. It is sending what we know works in schools to those schools. And so that is the best teachers, that is more time, that is kind of wraparound supports for students.
This model requires turnover in teaching staff and school leadership, something many in these school communities didn't want. Students at all 3 middle schools even staged walkouts in support of their teachers. According to Austin ISD, at least a third of teachers at Burnett won't be coming back for the upcoming school year. At Dobie, more than 2/3 of teachers are out. There's also a lot of turnover at Webb. The teachers who do come back to these campuses are set to get a big pay bump. Brandy Hosick with Austin ISD spoke to reporters last month.
We are offering for teachers specifically that meet those credentials the $15,000 annual stipend
for core classroom teachers.
The hope is that more experienced teachers will help students get better test scores, so those campuses are no longer rated as failing. And Hodge says research shows student achievement has improved significantly under the ACE model. But here's the catch. Once stipends for high-quality teachers ended,
A bunch of those highly effective teachers left and the test scores did fall.
Hodge says districts have to figure out how to keep providing resources to these campuses to sustain their success. But David DeMatthews, a professor in the UT Austin College of Education, says the ACE model is just a temporary fix if there aren't broader investments to boost teacher quality overall.
In some ways, you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're pulling out effective teachers from other parts of the school district and you're moving them into the school with the greatest need.
DeMatthews also says while the model may give an immediate bump to student test scores, that's not the be-all end-all.
Austin ISD's in hot water, maybe because they haven't been paying as close attention to some of these schools as they should. And now we're going to implement a model that heavily prioritizes student achievement on standardized tests to get out of hot water. But that's not necessarily what students need most from their teachers or from their school.
While Austin ISD officials say they're confident this model will improve student performance at Burnett, Dobie, and Webb, they do have a backup plan. If test scores are not where they need to be to avoid a fifth failing grade from the state, Austin ISD could decide to partner with charter schools to run the campuses. Doing that would also prevent a state takeover, at least temporarily. I'm Becky Fogel in Austin.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard.
As promised, digital editor Wells Dunbar joins us once again. He's monitoring the talk of Texas on this Thursday. Hello again, Wells.
Howdy, David. Good to be with you. And I need to make a correction and a quick apology about the esteemed Bill Hobby. The former lieutenant governor of Texas came up in the segment yesterday, and I am happy to report that Lieutenant Governor Hobby is a healthy and hale 93 years old. Well, speaking of the Texas legislature, lots to talk about that story at the top of the show, David, and quite a legal battle that may be setting up there regarding it as well. This would be the legislature's passage of this law requiring the 10 Commandments to be posted in Texas classrooms.
Right.
Tyler Malloy says that Governor Greg Abbott knew this would get thrown out, but signed it into law anyway to placate the base. Brian Wright says he's concerned about the wasted tax dollars that may be used here to print up posters, hire lawyers, all to lose in court, just like Louisiana. That prediction there from our listener. Some supporters of the law as well. One commenter on our Facebook page notes that nobody will force students to become Christians or read the Bible, calling most of the 10 Commandments good ethical rules to keep things civilized. But another commentator here on our page, Daphne High Hofnicker, says that we will see that the waste we will see because of these poorly written and poorly devised bills is unconscionable, especially in a state that's having trouble funding its own public schools. So quite the divisive issue, as you would expect. And of course, another listener here pointing out that on the Capitol grounds themselves, there is quite the large stone monument depicting the 10 Commandments in sculptural form there. So obviously a situation that hasn't gone anywhere and is going to continue to heat up. As we were talking about, not quite at the Supreme Court yet, David, but expected by many parties to make it there. And we're going to have a lot more about the Supreme Court tomorrow, I expect.
I think you're quite right about that. Yeah, there could be some really big cases coming out. We're still expecting to hear a decision in that case involving, I think it's styled as Paxton versus
the Free Speech
Coalition. That's it. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that has to do with whether or not it's a violation of First Amendment rights for you to have to, if you're an adult, have to submit to an age verification before you go to an adult website. That's a Texas state law. I guess it's been put on hold for now as it makes its way through the courts, but we will likely get that decision tomorrow since it was argued back in January, I believe it was.
Yeah, and a little inside ball here, it is, we try to sound like we're up to the latest, data here on the Standard, but these opinions are all released at 9 a.m., just 1 hour before we go to air, so we really do our darndest to have everything good to go there. So I expect we may have some quickly recorded or live live interviews tomorrow regarding everything that's going to be going on. Just fascinating stuff to hear about. Another story we were talking about on the show today, the polling of Texans, because I love these polls because they really sample a wide range of topics here, and I'm looking at one here noting that the majority of Texans oppose that total THC ban, like the one vetoed by Governor Greg Abbott. So lots of stuff to dig into there.
For sure. In fact, it's complicated among members of the Republican Party. Definitely worth checking out in depth over at texasstandard.org, where you can keep up with all the news 24/7. We're going to be back here tomorrow. We hope you can join us.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Wooldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington family, and the Cynthia and George Mitchell Foundation.